Welcome to this explainer. If you're an Edexcel GCSE Psychology student looking to absolutely master the criminal psychology topic, well, you're in exactly the right place. I am super excited to guide you through this today, because we're going to take some pretty complex psychological theories and turn them into crystal clear takeaways. Think of this as your ultimate high-yield revision resource on the effects of punishment and recidivism. We are going to break down the strengths, the glaring weaknesses, and exactly how you can apply all this knowledge to snatch those top exam marks. Let's get into it.
Here is our cognitive roadmap for the session. We'll kick things off with the recidivism problem. Then we'll dig into the psychology of prison, followed by alternative justice methods. Finally, we'll wrap up in the exam corner to put all this theory to the test. All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the recidivism problem.
To really evaluate how society punishes crime, we have to grasp the ultimate frustration of the entire criminal justice system. Think about it. The prison system is often less like a final destination and way more like a revolving door. You literally have offenders walking in, doing their time, and then turning right back around to re-enter the system all over again. It's a staggering failure, right? Society dishes out punishment to stop people from committing crimes, but for so many, that cycle just keeps repeating. So what is this endless cycle actually called? It's recidivism. And here's the formal definition you absolutely need to lock in for your exams. Recidivism is when an offender is punished for their crime but commits another crime when released. But, as psychologists, we have to ask the big question, why? Why do people commit crimes to begin with? And why on earth do they keep reoffending after going through the harsh reality of punishment? Well, a big piece of that puzzle lies in how we develop our sense of right and wrong. Let's think back to Kohlberg's 3 stages of moral development. At level 1, pre-conventional morality, which is what you usually see in younger kids, morality is totally self-centered. It's all about external consequences, like, will I get caught? Then you move up to level 2, conventional morality. This is where most adults operate. They internalize society's rules just to maintain order, thinking, I shouldn't do this because it's against the law. And finally, level 3 is post-conventional morality. Only some adults reach this stage, and it involves abstract principles that might actually transcend specific laws. So if an offender is stuck at a lower level of moral reasoning, say they only care about immediate consequences to themselves, traditional punishments might not actually do anything to change their internal moral compass. Which brings us to Section 2, the psychology of prison. When an offender's moral development goes off the rails, society's go-to solution is usually locking them up. But how does that actually work from a psychological standpoint? Well, the whole system is built on retributive justice, the idea that the individual must suffer as a result of their offense. And there are 4 main goals you need to memorize here. Number 1 is deterrence. Prison should be so awful that just the thought of it prevents future crime. 2 is incapacitation, basically taking the criminal out of circulation to keep the public safe. 3 is retribution, society taking its revenge and stripping away their freedom. And 4 is rehabilitation, using education and therapy so they hopefully leave as a totally changed person. Okay, let's actually apply some psychology to this. I want you to think about learning theory and behavioral modification for a second. What type of operant conditioning is actually at play inside a prison? Is it positive punishment, negative punishment, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement? Take a second and formulate your answer. Let's see if you got it right. Primarily, prison relies on positive punishment. The system is adding an unpleasant experience, like that intense loss of freedom, to decrease a bad behavior. But honestly, it's way more complex than just that. Prison can also act as a negative reinforcer. For example, if you reduce an inmate's sentence for good behavior, you're taking away something bad to encourage rule following. And here is a crazy twist. For some vulnerable people, like the homeless, prison can inadvertently be a positive reinforcer. It provides guaranteed food and shelter, which might literally encourage them to reoffend just to get back inside. Wild, right? Now for the critical evaluation. This is your golden ticket in the exam. What are the actual strengths and limitations of custodial sentences? On the plus side, prison definitely keeps the public safe, and it reinforces society's moral boundaries. Plus, it's backed by learning theory and principle. But wow, the limitations are glaring. Inside, offenders are constantly exposed to criminal role models who might actually praise their bad behavior. You've also got severe ethical issues like institutionalization. But the absolute most crucial stat you need to memorize is this. Approximately 40% of offenders reoffend within their first year of release. 40%. And for young offenders, it's even higher. That is a massive failure rate. So, If traditional prison is failing nearly half the time within year one, society desperately needs other options. Let's move to Section 3, Alternative Justice Methods. The first big alternative is community sentencing, which you might know as community payback. This is usually for minor or first-time offenses. It involves unpaid work like picking up litter, and it's often paired with curfews. The huge psychological benefit here is giving the offender a second chance while keeping them totally away from prison, so they aren't networking with hardened criminals. But evaluating it critically, over 10% of people fail to even complete their sentence, and the recidivism rate is still hovering over 30%. Because they are still out in the world, the opportunity to commit crime is literally right there. Now let's look at another method, restorative justice, or RJ. And I'm going to introduce this with a huge number. 85%. That is the satisfaction rate from victims who've actually taken part in face-to-face restorative justice meetings. RJ is all about communication. The offender meets the victim in a safe, controlled environment. They have to see the real human impact of what they've done, and the victims get to ask questions to finally get some closure. But does it actually work to stop crime? Well, yes. A landmark 2007 study by Sherman and Strang looked at offenders who went through restorative justice. Their reoffending rate dropped to just 11%. Compare that to a 37% reoffending rate in a matched control group who didn't do RJ. That is a massive, statistically significant drop in recidivism. Here's a punchy stat to drop into your evaluation essays. From a societal perspective, RJ makes total financial sense. Shaplin's 2007 conclusion found that for every £1 spent on restorative justice, the government ends up saving £8 in reduced reoffending costs. That is an incredible return on investment. But hey, we need to keep a balanced perspective here. Restorative justice is not some magic wand. It has very serious limitations. For instance, groups like Women's Aid have actively campaigned to ban RJ in cases of domestic abuse, arguing that it's totally inappropriate and can just further intimidate the victims. Plus, the whole thing falls apart if the offender doesn't feel genuine remorse. You also see really high dropout rates when offenders just lose their nerve to face their victims. And training the mediators who run these sessions, it is incredibly expensive. So while it's highly effective for young, first-time offenders who just need a short, sharp shock, it is definitely not for everyone. All right, Section 4, Exam Corner. We have covered a mountain of theory, stats, and evaluations. Now let's turn all that knowledge into actual GCSE marks. A real quick detour before we hit the behavioral scenarios. You need to be able to synthesize your revision by contrasting these behavioral modifications with biological treatments. Remember, sometimes crime or antisocial behavior is actually linked to underlying mental health conditions. While prison uses conditioning, biological treatments use medication. SSRIs work by blocking the reabsorption of serotonin to improve a person's mood. SNRIs go a step further, blocking both serotonin and noradrenaline to boost mood and alertness. Always remember to contrast these biological treatments with the behavioral punishments we've been talking about. Okay, picture this exam scenario for 2 marks. Joseph was caught stealing a car and has been sentenced to 2 years in prison. Explain why being sent to prison would be considered a punishment for his behavior. Take a second. How are you locking in both of those marks? Here's exactly how you break down the marks game. To get full credit, a generic answer just won't cut it. You have to apply the theory directly to Joseph. For Mark 1, you show accurate understanding. State that prison is a retributive punishment that physically removes him from society. For Mark 2, you need exemplification. Explain that Joseph suffers a massive loss of freedom and his day-to-day activities and social contacts are restricted specifically as a consequence for stealing that car. Theory plus direct application equals full marks every time. Let's try one more. George has been caught setting fires to bins in the local community. It is his first offense. Explain how restorative justice could be used with George. 2 marks again. How do you apply the mechanics of restorative justice to someone committing arson? Nail those 2 marks by doing this. Mark 1. State that RJ aims to allow George to actually meet the victims of his crimes, and be sure to point out that this is highly effective specifically because he is a young, first-time offender. Mark 2. Explain the underlying psychological goal. George needs to take full responsibility for setting those bins on fire by directly facing the local community and truly understanding the emotional and physical impact his actions had on them. And that is a wrap on our revision session. We've unpacked the revolving door of recidivism, the conditioning, and that shocking 40% failure rate of prisons, the risks of community service, and both the high satisfaction and steep limitations of restorative justice. So, I want to leave you with a provocative question to tie it all together. Based on the psychological evidence we've just covered today, which method of justice do you believe is truly most effective for society? Really think critically about your answer, because that level of thought is exactly what will make your exam essay stand out from the crowd. Keep revising, stay focused, and I will catch you in the next explainer.